Congratulations, you have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lambcast. This is episode 765, and I'm your regular host, Richard Kirkham of Kirkham A Movie A Day. This week, we have the March Movie of the Month chosen by the community and an online poll found on the website. In the 1970s wave of disaster films, there were luxury ocean liners capsized, luxury apartment buildings in flames, airplanes hijacked, cities razed by earthquakes, hurricanes, and bees. We also had 2 NFL championship games threatened by crazed maniacs. One of those films was chosen as the Movie of the Month for us today. If there are consistent threads in this wave of disaster pictures, it was that Irwin Allen produced them or Charlton Heston starred in them. Well, the outsized producer is absent this week, but we do get Moses on the show. 2-Minute Warning had a high concept easily summarized on the poster with the tagline, 91,000 people, 33 exit gates, 1 sniper. Well, we're 90,995 people short of that mark, but let's meet the 4 guests who will be beating everybody else to the exits first. There is a helicopter in the movie, but it fails to explode. Will Slater from Exploding Helicopter Podcast joins us to explain why this movie fails to deliver on his favorite theme.
I'm lonely, Charlie, and I need some loving.
This movie takes place on an awesome Sunday, but we can only get somebody from Awesome Friday to cover it for our calendar watchers out there. Welcome back, Matthew Simpson.
I'm happy to be here to watch this American Handegg-centered movie.
James Wilson from Blogging by Cinemalite was just standing in line to get a hot dog when I picked his pocket and took his wallet hostage until he joined the show. James, you can have your wallet back after the show, but I'm keeping the $7 that you had.
Oh, sorry.
And finally, lining this film up in his sights and managing to hit just enough voters to carry the movie to victory is Dave Anderson of the Free Kittens Movie Guide, who will host the show for most of the rest of the game, probably turning it back over to me in the last 2 minutes. Dave, you're the coach.
Okay.
Your plays.
All right. Well, part of me is still kind of surprised this was selected for Movie of the Month. It doesn't have the most stellar reputation. But anyway, the movie is 2-Minute Warning from 1976, starring Charlton Heston, John Cassavetes, and a huge cast of other familiar faces, some who we'll get to later. It was directed by Larry Pierce, who is probably best known for directing movies like Goodbye Columbus and The Other Side of the Mountain, which was his biggest hit. He mostly did romantic comedies and dramas, and 2-Minute Warning was one of the few that fall under the thriller genre category. These days, it's not all that widely remembered, but was fairly successful at the box office at the time, probably because it was released at the height of the popularity of the disaster genre, like you mentioned. And 2-Minute Warning is often lumped in with those, as was a similar thriller centered around a football stadium, Black Sunday, which was released the following year. But in my opinion, 2-Minute Warning isn't a disaster movie in the purest sense, but it looks and feels like one and structured very much like one. It's got a simple story, a huge cast, a lot of subplots, some pretty spectacular deaths, scenes of mass panic, and of course Charlton Heston. And disaster is still my favorite genre, so when I was a kid, of course I wanted to see it for my 13th birthday. But since it was rated R, my dad graciously offered to take me. And this is my personal connection with the movie. It was a big deal for a couple of reasons. First, I think this might have been the first R-rated movie I ever saw in a theater. I was still a few months away from gathering the courage to sneak into them on my own. But even if it wasn't, I'm 100% positive this is the first and only one either of my parents took me to because I wanted to see it. So that was a big deal. And second, it was because it was my dad who took me. I always had a decent relationship with him, but for the most part, we got along fine. But once I hit my terrible teens, we didn't have a lot of common ground, and we almost never did anything, just the two of us. So this was my adolescent version of a guy's night out, and my dad's choice of entertainment was never movies, but because the plot of this one is centered around football, it was him who provided me the first bit of useless but fascinating movie trivia I ever heard. And that was Joe Kapp, who plays an aging quarterback in the film, was a real-life quarterback in the NFL, which I didn't know. But anyway, the movie itself is about a psychotic sniper who manages to perch himself behind the scoreboard at LA's Memorial Coliseum during the championship game. We're supposed to assume it's the Super Bowl, but since the filmmakers didn't get any cooperation from the NFL, it's just called Championship 10. Similarly, both teams, that are depicted in the movie are not real NFL franchises, and long-range stadium shots used for the film are actually footage of a college game between Stanford and USC. I'm not sure why the NFL refused to cooperate with Universal in making this one, but they allowed Paramount to film the climax of Black Sunday during the actual Super Bowl. I guess it depends on who the producer knows. But for me, the most chilling aspect of 2 Minute Warning is we never really see the sniper's face or know his name until the end, and his actions are almost entirely point-of-view shots, from his initial practice kill, where he takes up this bicyclist from a hotel window, which blew me away when I first saw that, because I was not expecting the movie to be this graphically bloody. And anyway, other point-of-view shots are his long drive to the Coliseum, getting into the stadium, finally sneaking past guard dogs in order to get up behind the scoreboard. But what's scariest of all to me is we never really know his motives. And in the meantime, the game commences, during which time we're introduced to characters whose only purpose is, admittedly, probably to die. I won't say who just yet, but I will say about 3/4 of the cast don't really have any bearing on the plot. But without them, 2 Minute Warning would be probably 30 minutes long. It was, the main characters are Charlton Heston as Police Captain Holly and John Cassavetes as SWAT Commander Button, who are brought in to try to stop the sniper before he starts opening fire on the crowd. You'd mentioned, Richard, that Charlton Heston's done a lot of this stuff. He's probably been in more disaster movies than anyone else I can think of. And he's pretty reliable in these roles. Cassavetes was always a respected actor and director in the 70s, and he only showed up in audience pictures like this kind of to finance his own little film projects. So even though these two provide all the star power, both of their characters are actually kind of useless in this movie, because if they were truly good at their job, there would be no movie. And who the hell wants to watch a movie about a sniper who's prevented from sniping? Anyway, at the game's 2 Minute Warning, our sniper does start blowing away secondary cast members. And even though there's almost no action for most of the film, the last 15 minutes are pretty insane. This really is a violent movie, and maybe even a little bit more disturbing today, since it seems like there's a lot of random people doing terrible things like this, and where we don't know their motives. And I'll be the first to admit that 2 Minute Warning is a gratuitously violent movie. It's often melodramatic. It's occasionally overacted, but in my opinion, not by Heston, ironically. It's probably a little nihilistic, and critics generally hated it for all those reasons. I distinctly recall Gene Shalit. I don't know how many of you remember him.
Yes.
Yeah.
He wrote a scathing review. Yeah, that guy. He wrote a scathing review of this one, and so did Roger Ebert, who awarded it 1 star, even though he summarized the movie pretty damned accurately. Still, I have fond memories of the film, partially because of, it was one of those father-son moments, but also because, critics be damned. I think it's a genuinely good movie, even with its flaws. And I'll go to my deathbed defending it. I am interested in hearing on some of your takes on it.
Well, I'll be happy to start. I mentioned to you folks before that I have a personal relationship with the star of the film. The Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum was my home away from home for years and years. I attended USC. In fact, the game that they are showing that is the Trojans versus Stanford, that are the long shots in the movie, is a game I might very well have gone to. I can't remember. That was my freshman year at USC, and I was on the debate team, and every other weekend I was at a speech tournament, but there were weekends when I wasn't at the tournament, I went to the game. I just can't remember which game I saw. So I could be in the background there, but I can tell you that there are 2 or 3 shots of tunnel number 24. My last 5 years of season tickets, which ended just a year ago, were at tunnel 24. So one of the shots where they're speaking at the entrance of the tunnel, that's the concession stand that I would go to on a regular basis, and when they come out of the tunnel into the stadium, I'd walk up those stairs a long way because our seats were high up. We were row 80. We were the cereal bowl seats, it's one more Cheerio in the crowd, and we were out the edge of the bowl. Like I said, I must have gone to, 60 or 70 games at the Coliseum. The Coliseum is, a very famous venue. It has hosted 2 Olympics, World Series, AFC Championship games, NFC Championship games, Super Bowls. It may be the most iconic American sports stadium. I know that everybody thinks of Madison Square Garden, and I understand that. But when it comes to international activities and events, it's going to host another Olympics, so it'll host a 3rd Olympics in 4 years from now. So it's a great venue, and when you see the seats that they're sitting in and the numbers on those seats, I'll include it in the illustrated version of the podcast. I have two of those seats sitting on my front porch right now, because when they renovated the stadium, they offered the seats that they were removing to season ticket holders. So,
for free?
For free. I had to buy feet for them because they're made to attach to a concrete step, but they work very nicely, and I do sit on my porch regularly, staring out at the world in those seats, remembering my times at the Coliseum, and I'm sure I will return to the Coliseum again. It just it got harder the last couple of years traveling back and forth from Texas. We did it a couple of times. I won't say a couple of times. We did it several times after we'd moved here, when we still had season tickets. So the Coliseum, I was happy to see in the film featured as much as it was. And in fact, the first 2 minutes of the film is all like
all shots of the Coliseum.
A love letter to the Coliseum. So I was excited to see. I can't remember if I saw this movie. It really feels like I did, but because it's right in my wheelhouse. It's set in the city that I lived in at the time. The school that I went to is right there. The stadium that I was at on a regular basis, and it starred Charlton Heston, who in the 1970s, along with George C. Scott, was my most frequent actor that I saw in movies. So it seems like I should have seen it, but I don't really have much of a memory of it. So it's like I saw it for the first time this week, and it has a lot of the drawbacks that disaster films have. The secondary characters are cardboard cutouts. That they're primarily there to be disappearing at some point in the process, and some of them are really unpleasant, and it's not a surprise that they were the ones chosen to go, but others are just like, well, That would have been interesting. And there's other trivia in the movie that we'll be talking about as well. It's probably longer than it needs to be. It could be a little bit more efficient. But I thought it worked out well. And when Dave said it's not really a disaster film, I kind of knows what he means, except at the end, when you get 90,000 people trying to get out of the stadium all at once, that's a disaster. And that's where the disaster element comes in.
Al, if you think it's too long as is, you should check out the made-for-TV version.
I've heard of that.
I'm going to talk about it later.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
I'll stop
Matthew,
here and let somebody else. Yes, go ahead.
Matthew, what do you think of this?
Well, I watched the movie for the first time yesterday, and I thought that it was aggressively fine. I didn't really like it even that much, to be totally honest. I thought that a lot of the supporting characters were fun, which is often the case with this kind of movie. And I thought that it had a real opportunity to be something interesting and special and to have, but it doesn't have anything to say. And because of that, I found it kind of frustrating. And then at the end, my favorite of the supporting characters gets shot like immediately. So, yeah, I found it kind of frustrating. And I started to get what the critics were saying back in the 70s when this came out. That, like, I don't know, I found the faceless sniper with no discernible motivation to be a bit frustrating. And I found Heston and Cassavetes' characters to be basically just incompetent. Like, what a failure of policing,
Yeah, they don't really do anything.
No, they don't. They just let a sniper hang out around 90,000 people for an entire football game. And I don't know. And the one guy who tries to do anything gets hit in the face and falls off the scoreboard, like, immediately. So, I don't know. I found this movie very frustrating. I'm glad that I watched it. I'm always happy to add another Charlton Heston and 70s disaster movie to my headcanon, but I found it to be a very frustrating watch.
Will, what about you?
Well, I think aggressively fine is a great way to summarize this film. I mean,
that was nice, actually.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. There are some things I really enjoyed about it. Fortunately I'm a big disaster movie fan, so I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the way that this film apes some of the tropes of that particular genre. So I enjoyed the secondary characters that we are introduced to. I certainly don't think it's the greatest collection of characters, and I find some of their storylines kind of puzzling because there isn't really much of a kind of beginning, middle, or end to any of them, and some of them are very, very peculiar. I enjoy Beau Bridges and his irritatingly boisterous family. I kind of like the idea of Beau Bridges actually coming across as the biggest kid in that family, even though that he's meant to be the head of it. I was really intrigued by the melodrama of Gina Rowlands and David Janssen in this sort of bickering, on the verge, always teetering on the verge of breaking up couple. It was a very peculiar dynamic there. I didn't quite understand it. Sort of Jack Klugman's kind of gambler. It's kind of, there's not really that much sort of going on there, really, apart from the fact that he's, is he about to finally get out of this hole that he's in with these shady mob-like characters? So I kind of enjoyed all of that drama, even though some of it was pretty, not on the weaker side of the type of melodrama that we get in these types of moments. So many of the other disaster movies do it better. I think for me, though, where the biggest failing of this film is that I didn't find that there was that much tension to it, because the sniper is essentially in position very early within the film. The police know that he's in position and he's got a rifle and he's probably going to use it very early in the film. And then the police don't really do anything. I mean, they essentially say, well, we're going to have to go in on the 2-minute warning, And so that kind of leads you to this idea that, okay, they're going to be trying something before we get to that particular marker where they're forced to take action with God knows what consequences. But they as was mentioned, is the kind of the groundsman, poor groundsman who gets, rifle butted in the face, is the only person who ultimately actually does anything. And it's sort of, I kind of think that part of the film really lets the movie down. And I don't know whether, if they'd plotted it slightly differently, in the sense of the police had got some information that there's a sniper amongst the crowd, and they've only got fragments of information that they're racing against time to try and piece together to try and identify who this person is. And, he's only planning to get to that sort of crow's nest position at the last minute. I think that could have then had that would have, for me anyway, I don't know, that would have been one way to actually introduce an element of tension into the film, give Charlton Heston and his police colleagues something to do. And I for me, if they'd tweaked the plot that way, it would have been a kind of worked more as a thriller. But yeah, ultimately, I think that aspect of the film didn't work. I enjoyed some of the disaster movie aping elements of the film. So yeah, overall, aggressively fine.
James.
That seems to be the theme, aggressively fine, and that's a fine phrase for it. I first saw this in 1976 when it came out at the John Dance Theater. And looking back on it, I remember it, but I couldn't tell you anything about it. It wasn't that memorable. And considering that I was I thought highly of Goodbye Columbus and A Separate Peace, and went to see this movie because it was directed by Larry Pierce. It tells you that I didn't think much of it at the time. Watching it again last night, I was surprised that I thought, given the history of all the serial killer disaster movie tropes that we've gone through over the last, good Lord, 50 years, that I would think it was stale, but I didn't. There were a lot of things about it that I really liked. Number one, I think Pierce is actually a really good director. He was part of that slate of TV directors who came out after the Frankenheimers and the Lumettes and the other guys from the golden age of television, Schaffner and others. But he never really attained the heights that they did, because some of his movies kind of did badly at the box office. This one, the whole preamble with the shots of the stadium, they're just beautifully shot. Everything's really, really nice. I like the fact that the assassin is somebody we don't even see. I was amazed at those handheld shots giving his point of view, because some of that looked really difficult to pull off, especially with the cameras they had in 1976. As a thriller, I guess you always have to compare it with Black Sunday, but I found this in some ways superior, in that there was less melodrama to it and more, bread and butter. Let's get to the intricacies of what you do to take this guy out. I also have a fascination with movies that show you the inner workings of anything. Like there was this takes you inside the LA Memorial Coliseum so that it seems like you could make your way through it for the first time without any sort of direction or having to talk to an usher, because you knew where every nook and cranny, every bit of graffiti was, and it took you down to the studs of the Colosseum. I thought the crowd scenes were really convincing, especially towards the end. And, I also thought that the scale of it it's relegated to that stadium, but that stadium is full of people. And I kept thinking, okay, how many extras did they hire for this shot? How many extras did they hire for this shot? I bet they only needed 50 people for this day, but the rest of this, they probably went to a game and just shot a bunch of fans, because that stadium is full of people. There was no CGI back then. You couldn't replace them with cardboard cutouts. But that scale kind of blew me away. As far as the actors, everybody did their jobs. I thought Cassavetes was fine. David Jansen, who was one of my favorite actors because of The Fugitive, he's in it, but he doesn't. I don't think he plays the character as written.
Probably not.
Who plays a car salesman with a blustery ego, but
he plays him as David Jansen.
But he plays him as he plays him as Richard Kimball hiding out in the stadium with Jenna Rowlands, rumpled and with his head down and looking aggrieved. As far as here's where aggressively fine comes in. It seems like they didn't waste the co-stars because the stories were with people who were actually going to get in real trouble. You didn't find out what happened to the guy with the bad toupee behind Jansen and Rowlands, for example. Or
Lucy's boyfriend.
Yes. What happened to Jeffrey?
Jeffrey seemed like a dick, so I assume he went everyone for themselves and left.
I assumed that he was he got trampled.
Well, I don't blame him for being a dick. I mean, his girlfriend's being hit on by the guy in the other seat.
Yeah, and if at the time he was married to Rhoda Morgenstern, so that's the only reason David Grohl was in there.
And she was married.
She was married to the director.
Yeah, but I just found it really good, really efficient. I was surprised that I liked it and respected it as much as I did, especially considering it didn't cause much of a blip of memory. It didn't sear itself into my brain in 1976, but I have a lot more respect for it now. I really enjoyed it. I was worried about Heston's hair a lot of the time. Cassavetes, and you knew Cassavetes and Rowlands were in it to finance one of his films.
Sure.
You just knew it. But that's fine.
Husbands
they're
and wives,
both
I think.
good. Huh?
Husbands and wives, I think.
Yeah. But I liked it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I came out respecting Larry Pierce a little bit more, because he managed to pull off something and make it believable. But like I said, I kept thinking, okay, how many extras were needed for this shot? And I thought, well, I'll bet you they're spending all that time outside of the stadium. Those were good days because They just needed the principal actors in front of the camera, and they didn't need background. And that's all I have to say about that.
I think I would disagree with you related to the cast. I think one cast member in particular was really wasted in this one, and that's Walter Pidgeon.
He doesn't get a line, does he?
He has one line, and it's something like, oops, sorry, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, for a guy of his stature who's been in all these classic films, to play someone who's maybe got 2 or 3 scenes, it's kind of a pathetic role. I don't know. I think I'd like to know his motivations for agreeing to do this, but you think they would have thrown him a bone and given him a couple more lines or something like that.
Well, but, in 1976, nobody knew from Walter Pidgeon, and I can't think of what his most prominent role was before then. It's something you'd have to look up in IMDb, but it's like.
Well, he was repeating himself playing a pickpocket. He was just wasn't it Harry in Your Pocket with James Coburn?
Right.
2 years before. So it's, I guess maybe they hired him because after all, he already was trained as a pickpocket.
He did the research.
This movie is actually based on a novel, and I'm wondering if anyone else has read or heard of it.
No.
Okay.
I was surprised that it was based on a novel.
So was I initially. It's an author named George LaFontaine, and I do remember reading the book after seeing the movie, because this was back in the days that if you wanted to revisit a movie but didn't want to wait until it showed up on TV a few years later, you could always read the book or the novelization. So I read a lot of books after seeing the movies first, like Jaws. And by the way,
that'll hurt you.
Yeah, Jaws is my favorite book of all time, movie of all time, but the book is absolute garbage. And I remember the 2-Minute Warning book being garbage too, and really kind of depressing, because to me, one of the strong points of the movie, and you brought that up, James, is the POV shots of the killer and the fact that we know almost nothing about him, including his motives. And the book kind of diffuses that, and he's one of the main characters in the book and has this tragic past. And I was a teenager at the time, and when you're a teenager, you don't really give a damn about tragic pasts.
Yeah.
So this is not one of those cases where the book was better. But with this movie, and feel free to voice your opinion, of course, would it have been better if the killer was more of a character than a plot device? Would it have made this movie any better?
Oh, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I agree.
One of the things that I liked about this movie is that you don't go into any detail about the killer at all. He's just some rando. He's a kook. He's a psycho, as he's described in the movie. And I think that's the position you should take.
Well,
one of these things.
I think the way they introduced him in the film, with that basically his practice shot from the hotel room, and then his drive over to the Coliseum, and his whole entry into the Coliseum and sneaking up into the peristyle and sitting behind the scoreboard and eating a Baby Ruth. That's we don't need his psychological profile. We know he's crazy, and that he's just a random assassin at the moment. It doesn't. There is a plot point that comes up at one time that suggests that the president was going to be there, and so it might be that he was there to assassinate the president, but that's never made clear. And as far as we can tell, he seems just interested in killing people, not any particular person, but random people. And that's the thing that makes, I think, the film scary. If we knew more about it, if we saw some motivation, it would be less interesting. It's the fact that anybody at any time could be the potential victim out of those 90,000 people who were at the stadium. That's the thing that's truly frightening.
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to jump in and just say it sounds like I'm the lone voice of dissent on this one, because I feel like the killer having any motivation at all would have made the movie better for me. Even if it was just like, even if it was just like, insert industry had a downturn and now he's desperate, anything at all, any small amount of backstory, anything to avoid just having them wrap up and be like, well, I think there's a moment at the end of the movie that I laughed out loud at where like they finally like got him and they ask about him, and Cassavetes is like, we'll hear about it on the news in the next couple of weeks, and then the movie ends.
Yeah. Yeah, I love Chuck Heston's interrogation. He's going, "You miserable son of a bitch."
Yeah.
He's really going to cooperate there. But I actually thought, I don't think the problem was. Yeah, well, obviously I've come down. I don't think, for me, the issue is not the explanation of his motives. It's really the sort of the fact that the film largely spins its wheels for so much of the time once that sniper is in position, and there's a really sort of weak sort of bit of reasoning as to why he's not opening fire already, because they suggest, he's waiting for the end of the game because that'll give him the chance to sort of slip out of the stadium as the crowds go out. But, well, if he starts shooting, a mass shooting inside the stadium, everyone's going to be leaving the stadium then anyway, so he'll be able to exit quite safely then. And for me, I actually think not knowing his motivations, I think if they could have an explanation as to quite, as I was laid out earlier, if they sort of plotted it slightly differently, then I don't think the absence of a motivation would be a problem. If anything, kind of heightens it, feeds into that idea of nihilism. The sort of the scary thing is, how do you stop this person? Because we don't know his motivations. In some ways, it heightens it. But so I think it's the problems with the film are not about motivation. It's really about the kind of the plotting.
I mean, I think knowing his motivation, like knowing his motivation, so we can try to. This would require them to want to try to stop him, which they don't seem to want to do. So,
well, if they stopped him, the movie was over.
They could try though. They don't try. What does Charlton Heston do for the
his TV?
Yeah, I mean.
That's right. At one point, he chews out the director of the broadcast, which is honestly that's a pretty fun scene. I can't remember the dialogue exactly, but I remember when the director's like, "This isn't." I can't remember what he says now, but he says get out of the way of the TV, and then Charlton Heston lays into him because it's a police operation. Meanwhile, the police are conducting no operation, which is I found this movie very frustrating. I'm just going to reiterate.
Well, I'm fascinated by the speech that Cassavetes gives at the end of the film, because he kind of whines. They're looking at the body of the killer, and he sort of whines about how the media are going to spend the next 2 weeks humanizing the killer. We're going to be, all we're going to be hearing about is how the police sat on their hands for an hour. He's sort of how we're going to be hearing about basically the kind of the terrible childhood this killer had, and all the kind of things that humanize him. And I'm sorry, John. What you're actually going to be hearing about is how the police sat on their hands for God knows how many hours. The problems in the chain of command between Charlton Heston and the SWAT unit, the prioritization of the VIP safety over anybody else in the crowd. That's what the media are going to be picking the bones over for the next 2-3 God knows how many months in the aftermath of this cluster mess. So it's sort of I kind of a weird sort of footnote that this film sort of chooses to end on.
Well, obviously there's a bigger time issue, because a football game is going to run 3.5 to 4 hours that it's going on, and a major national game like this that is supposed to be the championship probably is going to be even longer. However, the incompetence of the police and the SWAT units to do anything about what's going on, I'm sorry, we have a recent example of that right here with the attempted assassination of Trump back in the summer, where it looks like everybody was pretty damn casual about what was going on before the guy took a shot. It wasn't until he was lining up his shot that anybody did anything. And we've got the same kind of scenario going on here at the stadium. It just goes on for 3 hours.
But that's not the message of the movie. So this, certainly, I don't think that's the message of the movie. So it just is a sort of peculiar. I mean, I don't think this movie does have a message, which is absolutely fine. But it's I don't know, it just. Yeah, it just, what are you? So if it needs to work, as it doesn't have a message, it needs to work much better as a thriller, and that element of the film for me just doesn't land.
Yeah, I agree totally, and it's sort of unintentionally a comment on the incompetence of police, but you can tell it's not trying to be. It's just an unintended consequence of showing them not doing anything. And then my other favorite bit when Bo Burgess is like, I saw a guy with a rifle, and they're like, we are going to arrest you now.
And they're surrounding him, 6 of them around this one guy in his cardigan, and not saying anything, just staring at him through sunglasses.
Yeah, that was a nice moment. I like the staging of that little sequence.
I guess the reason is this one still works for me as a thriller, and granted. I saw this when I was a teenager and, enamored with these types of films. And so I'm probably still willing to give it a pass because of the impact it had on me back then. But, I think the sniper being completely anonymous was a great plot device. You mentioned that opening scene, Richard, where he takes the practice shot. I was sitting in the theater watching that and going, wow, this is not going to quite be the Towering Inferno or Airport. This is something darker. And I thought, for me, it established a pretty grim tone right from the get-go. And, I've always been one of those people who thinks a lot of horror movies would be scarier if they told us less and showed us less. A great example being the Alien franchise. To me, what made the original Alien scary is that there was no backstory to these monsters, and the more the sequels explained, the less scarier these xenomorphs became.
Yes.
And I think the fact that we don't see the sniper's face until the very end just makes the whole thing really unnerving.
Yeah, and I always find myself thinking after one of these real life incidents, I don't care what his motives were.
Yeah.
I find that actually kind of refreshing, rather than making him the aberration as opposed to the focus of the movie. He's going to be the focus of the movie anyway. You might as well keep him anonymous and because the less you see of him, the less of a threat he is. It's the Jaws principle. The shark is scarier when you don't see it.
Okay.
I guess my problem there is that we do see the sniper a lot. They're cutting to him all the time.
Yeah, but you don't know what his motivation is, and you don't. He's just a force of nature. He just is there, and he's a threat. And I just gotta disagree. I find it refreshing that we don't get any backstory for the guy. Rather than trying to investigate who it is, they're just trying to get a good, clean shot, and that's what they spend most of their time doing. Because he's usually hunkered down, at the highest point of the stadium. So they're just trying to get leverage, and that's why they don't take him out, and that's why they don't try to assault him in the first thing. They've got a stadium full of people, and the first shot is going to start causing a panic. So while he's just sitting there eating Baby Ruths and listening to the radio, they're going to basically plan things out before doing an assault, because look what happened to Brock Peters.
By the way, since you mentioned Jaws and the shark, I do think it's an interesting little side note that Susan Blackline is in the movie briefly.
Oh, she is?
Yes, she is.
Yes.
That's right.
Oh,
She's the
And
girl
her
who
attributes.
flashes her chest. She doesn't, show her boobs, but she opens her jacket to show the logo of the team that she supports on the TV screen. They show that for a second. Apparently, she's supposed to be a regular. And by the way, there were characters in the LA area at the time that were like that everybody knew. Angeline
yes.
was a character
Yes.
that people knew about. At the stadium there, we had Gypsy Boots, who rang his bell and stood up, and I mean, he went through the whole stadium getting people to cheer, and he was a crazy nature boy kind of guy, and he was famous as a personality at the stadium. So there were people who were like that. That was kind of an interesting comparison or connection to see. There is something about the film that I do want to point out that is probably the most positive thing about it. This movie did get an Academy Award nomination, and it got it for editing. And the reason, I think, is because of the way that they were able to integrate the staged scenes of the football game with the regular scenes of the football game with the people in the stands who were there to actually see the game and the people in the stands who were there for their background in the film. And I think it's really nicely integrated together there. It's hard to tell sometimes when you're looking at the college game that is in the far background there versus the one that involves the players that they have the close-ups on. The uniforms are just close enough that you don't distinguish them at the distances that they're shooting them from. The two things that give away that there's a college game going on there, you can see the band in two of the shots. You can see the SC band with their distinctive Trojan helmets and capes walking onto the field at one point, at halftime I think it is. And for the Stanford band, they're just in the bottom of one shot. They were notorious for not doing much to dress up. They had white caps and red jackets, and you can see a few of them interspersed down at the bottom of one shot. But otherwise, I think that it really looks like it's one whole game that they have put together here as the background for the movie.
Yeah, technically it's an extremely well put together movie. Considering how little action there really is on screen into the last 15 minutes, it does create a sense of urgency, throughout the movie. At least I thought it did.
It doesn't have I'll tell you, it doesn't have the energy of a football film where they're showing the plays and you care about what team wins or comes from behind or overcomes some adversity, except from Jack Klugman's point of view, who's obviously, for him, it's a life or death issue, and everybody else gives a damn to some degree, but not to the same degree. They haven't been hung out the window.
Well, speaking of Klugman, I wanted to talk about the cast a little bit and get your guys' opinions on who stands out to you. And I wanted to start by first mentioning David Jansen. I've always had a soft spot for David Jansen. To me, he always resembled Clark Gable after tying one on, and he always came across as a guy whose regular diet consists of cigarettes and martinis.
Yes,
and and those vices did get the best of him. And he always looked like he was 48 years old, and including his early roles.
Yeah.
And his humorless expression and gravelly delivery almost never changed. We get the impression that his off-screen persona is probably the same as his on-screen persona. But there's always something about him that made it hard for me to take my eyes off him. I think, I don't know if I'd call it charisma, but I find his naturalistic approach oddly appealing. And his performance to me is one of the highlights of this movie, even if he is showing up to be himself. And the other one, as you mentioned, a couple of you mentioned, is Jack Klugman as the Sandman. Until this movie, to me, he was always Oscar Madison from The Odd Couple. And I like his character in this one. He's kind of pathetic, kind of a big talker. He's a gambler in debt to a bookie who's going to kill him if he doesn't pay him back. So his life is literally on the line for this game. And I was kind of invested in him in this one more than the other people, in the stands, especially his conversations with the priest he happened to be sitting next to, who was played by
Mitchell
Ryan. Yeah, Mitchell Ryan, who I didn't know at the time. It wasn't until revisiting this movie years later that, that's the bad guy from Lethal Weapon. But yeah, I thought those were, of the secondary characters, those are, to me, were the two most engaging actors.
Well, I think David Jansen, I'm like you. I had a soft spot in the 70s for him. I remember watching Harry O, which was a short-lived TV series in the 70s.
You guys are ruining some of my trivia questions.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. But I watched it because he was in the series. I thought his character in this was so dour and such a downer that I didn't really care much for the character. Maybe he's a good actor because he's perfectly cast. He's in a pissy mood about everything, and how Gina Rowlands fell in love with him, I'm not quite sure. And so I don't spoil anything for anybody, but I was less disappointed in the outcome for him than I was for Jack Klugman. And the other actors in this, they're fine. I was surprised. We got this coming up as one of our exit questions about what couldn't you be making. You guys talked pretty positively about Beau Bridges as the big kid in the family, except for the part where he smacks his kid up the side of the head because he's whining about getting a hat, and I'm going, really? That doesn't make him a more sympathetic character later on. It might be accurate or truthful, but it was a little weird.
Well, this film is from that sort of golden age, inverted commas, but add some inverted commas there, where you could just openly strike your child in public, where you could grab the breast of your girlfriend in a restaurant, where there was, this was a golden age where flabby middle-aged men with graying, receding hair, were the objects of desire for implausibly hot women. I mean, it was for being back in 1976.
Lucky Jack. Okay.
Yeah. You couldn't make this movie today, could you?
Probably not that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Some of the cool stuff about this film, for me, was, I can't remember. One of you had mentioned, the behind the scenes stuff about this, the stadium and knowing your way around. The other thing I thought was cool were the scenes about how the game is broadcasted. Especially in the TV trailer, multiple voices. It seemed like controlled chaos. When I first watched the movie September 5, I briefly thought of this movie and those scenes. And by the way, the guy playing the TV director, Andy Sedaris,
was a
TV sports director in real life, and more amusingly, he went on to direct a lot of TNA B movies in the 80s. So he was definitely knew his character. But I thought those shots were pretty interesting.
Yeah, those shots that part of the film was great because you got a very real sense of kind of like his live television being put together. And I was reminded as well of September 5 when I watched this film, and I was thinking, maybe you could remake 2 Minute Warning, but rather than have the emphasis on the sort of the killer and the police action to try and stop him, maybe you put sort of Andy Sedaris' sort of team of television producers at the heart of the film, and you make them the heroes. They're trying to get this television epic of the Super Bowl out, whilst all these interfering cops are milling around, like concerned about the safety of the spectators and trying to get their killer. So I maybe rework 2 Minute Warning along those lines.
Look, I
Well,
don't. It's not an exact match, but you should probably watch September 5 based on this pitch.
Yes.
Well, it's in the control room that everyone first realizes there's someone in the stadium with a gun, and I liked how that was handled. The one guy looking at that one monitor and his jaw dropping open as he sees the guy with the rifle. It's an interesting idea for a remake, and considering that most films shouldn't be remade unless they weren't perfect to begin with, this would be an ideal candidate. This movie was inevitably compared to Black Sunday, which was released the following year, probably to the similarities in their premises, and the fact that they were released more or less around the same time. I had two questions for this one. One, are such comparisons warranted? And two, which is the better film of the two?
Well, I think inevitably it's warranted because the subject of the attacks is the championship football game, and the crowd is a big part of it. They are the potential victims there. So, of course, you've got to have a comparison there. But they do feel like completely different films because this is, although it's not in real time, it is essentially played out over the course of a 4-hour period, whereas Black Sunday is a procedural for the first 2/3 of it, trying to track down terror suspects and connect the lines or the dots in order to figure out what's going to happen and where it's going to happen. And it's an international film that travels from Israel to London to Miami. So you're going a lot of different places in the film, whereas obviously this film is set primarily in Los Angeles and 90% of it at the one location.
So which do you think is a better film?
Well, if I was going to talk about the quality of the films, I'd say Black Sunday is the better quality film. It's been a while since I've seen it, although I like it quite well. I think it probably would measure up, and say if I was doing some kind of ranking, I'd say it would be a 4 out of 5 kind of film, whereas this is closer to a 3 out of 5 sort of film.
There is one thing that impressed me about this movie is that the crowd scenes, the panicky crowd scenes, relied less on shaky cameras and obscuring the fact that they had, a limited number of people as panicking extras. Ever so often in the climax of Black Sunday, I said, "Oh well, they're trying to hide the fact that they don't have that many people here, just because they're trying to add to the confusion by moving the camera around chaotically." But that's just an observation on my part as far as how the two handled the subject of the big crowds.
Well, for me,
I would agree with that, actually. I thought the stampede at the end was pretty much the best part of the movie, actually.
I was really impressed by it.
And as someone who's constantly complaining about how I want modern action movies to just pull the camera back and let me watch what's happening, I did very much appreciate that they just pulled the camera back and let me watch what was happening.
Yeah.
Even when they're stampeding outside of the stadium, already safely out of harm's way.
Yeah.
Well, everybody it's tough to get out of the parking lot.
I guess so, yeah.
So that happens in every game.
I think of the two, I agree with you, Richard, that Black Sunday is probably it's better written, it's better constructed, it's better acted. I think 2 Minute Warning is a little bit more fun. I think the climax is more exciting. As much as I love Black Sunday, because I'm a huge Frankenheimer fan, to me that film really dropped the ball during the climax. Not just the crowd scenes, but the special effects themselves are terrible. And
the blimp is a little bit of a cartoon when
it's
when
pretty
it's
wonky.
inserted into the stadium.
Another wonky thing that has been brought up is, I wanted to get back to this, is the film's overall depiction of the police, which is not positive. And another incident I wanted to bring up is when they spot another guy in the stadium who's sitting up underneath the lights, and he's a potential second shooter.
Mm-hmm.
So John Cassavetes' character and another SWAT guy come up, and they bring him down, and they drag him into the restroom, and he just beats the shit out of him, trying to get information out of him. And even after it's determined that he's totally harmless, I mean, they just, I mean, talk about a bad image of the LAPD in general. And then Cassavetes just takes off without a second thought, leaving this poor bastard in pain.
Well, that's one of the reasons I don't think the Rodney King thing was about race. I think it was just about the police. LAPD were badasses in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
they did what they wanted. They had, if James Cromwell is an accurate depiction of the police chiefs of the 1940s and 50s, you got a pretty good idea how the LAPD was formed in terms of how they dealt with criminals. Being an LA resident for most of my life, I mean, I lived in the city at one point, but I lived outside of the city for most of my life. But I obviously went to school there. They had a reputation as a tough police force. They were not user friendly, as they say.
Well, I think the depiction of the police at this film is actually, in some ways, is one of the interesting aspects of this film. I guess not necessarily from, I think, the intention of the writers or anything, but if you think about the history of terrorism, the fact that in the 1970s, governments around the world were rapidly having to evolve how they managed these types of terrorist situations. And we've already mentioned September 5, which depicts the Munich massacre in 1972, and a big part of the, it's as documented in documentaries and as depicted in that film, the response of the police and authorities, they were really out of their depth. They responded as best they could, but it was a largely, so many errors, largely inept response. And in some ways, looking at this film from a modern day perspective, it's the kind of the response of the police to this situation seems appalling. But probably it's probably for the standards of the day. I don't know. It's probably not too far off of what would have probably have taken place. I mean, today there's no way Charlton Heston would just be independently making all of the decisions about what happens. I mean, that he would be, one link in the chain of command, in terms of the response to it. So it's an aspect of the film that's probably dated very badly, but in reality, probably seems ludicrous to people viewing the film today, but probably it actually isn't a million miles away from what would have happened in 1976.
Yeah, the security issues obviously in 1976 were a lot different than they are today. Today you can't get into a stadium without going through a screening process, emptying your pockets, going through a metal detector, and that's hours before the games begin, not just, the last minute kind of stuff. There's usually a very heavy police presence around. So they wouldn't have to wait for them to show up. They'd already be there. They probably already have a SWAT squad available at most of these events. And when you're talking about a major event like the NFL's championship game or the Super Bowl, holy criminy, the amount of security nowadays is ridiculous. In 1975-76, when this film was made, it probably was a little bit more than we're depicting in the movie here, but certainly not the same level of anxiety, which I think is another example of why this film it's of its time, and the fact that
sure.
you can tear open a Baby Ruth bar with your teeth, which you could never do today.
No,
I don't think I could do it then.
Well, they were paper wrappers then.
Yeah.
We can't talk about this movie without talking about the television version, and I don't know how familiar any of you are with this version, but back in 77, 78, because the premise of a nameless sniper shooting people at random was apparently too much for television, Universal reshot a ton of new footage for this movie's broadcast on television, and they actually altered the plot. They added new characters who are using this sniper as a way to distract police from an art heist nearby. And they even brought back Warren Miller, who played the sniper, for new scenes. And he's the character hired by thieves, and so we see his face, we hear him speak, and for me, it totally undermines what made 2 Minute Warning disturbing in the first place, and really undermines what the whole film was about. And the new scenes are ridiculous. I don't know how many of you have seen this.
I have not.
I have not.
They do nothing but pad the thing out. And Universal's done this before. They did the same thing with the movie Earthquake when it aired on TV to sort of fill a 2-hour time or 2-part time slot. But at least they didn't change the plot of the damn movie. But if you're curious or masochistic, that TV version is a bonus feature on Shout Factory's release of this film. And as train wrecks go, it's a wonder to behold. I mean, there's a huge discrepancy between the shots, between Larry Pierce's film and the shot for television footage. It's kind of jaw-dropping, in fact.
I mean, I've not seen it. I've only read about it, but yeah, it just seems completely baffling decision to buy a film that they deem unbroadcastable, and then to spend so much money on shooting not just a few scenes, from what I understand, 40 minutes worth of footage to insert into it. It's just, a baffling, why not buy a completely different film that you can show intact and not have to create a new one in order to do so? Totally bizarre.
TV broadcast of films in the 70s was just baffling.
It was awful.
I mean, we could talk about ABC's treatment of the James Bond movies. We could talk about the sequence at the beginning of Fistful of Dollars with Harry Dean Stanton that was shot to try to explain who the man with no name was and what his motivation was, which was ludicrous. Duel, although this is a reverse case, they added scenes to that to pad it out for European theatrical runs, and sometimes you can see that version rather than the really taut ABC Movie of the Week version that Spielberg originally did. It was a nightmare for completists, but now this sort of thing, or I should say purists rather than completists, but now when the credits of films are basically speed rolled through in the corner of the screen, you can't beat the theatrical experience for any movie anymore.
Yeah, I think Universal again. They did the same thing with Dune.
Yes.
They did a bad film even worse. And I mean, David Lynch hated it so much that he insisted on taking his name off the credits.
Well, what's different about this film is that they shot new footage. The other films, they often just took outtakes or deleted scenes and put them back in. I remember seeing there's another film that was very successful. I think they just wanted to. It may have been one of those ones that they expanded to 2 nights. I can't remember. Superman, when it was broadcast, had scenes added to it that weren't in the theatrical release. Things that you didn't need, but it was there to fill in a time slot or give them an extra night of screening. I'm not sure whether or not it happened with that film, but I know a lot of the others did. The Dune example is an illustration where there was footage that David Lynch shot, but did not integrate it into the theatrical element of the film. And Lynch took his name off of the film for a lot of reasons. That was one of them. The fact was that it was one of the only films, I think it may be the only film that he didn't have final cut on. And he was operating with Dino De Laurentiis' company, and the De Laurentiis were deeply involved with the movie as the producers. Raffaella De Laurentiis was on the set the whole time that the movie was being shot. So they wanted more out of it, and I think the Universal was famous for were they the producers on this particular film, because they had contracts with the TV networks, and so it may very well be one of those things where somebody's back is getting scratched as a way of massaging the contracts that they have. We'll take the film, but we're going to add some stuff in it, or you add some stuff to it, and we'll run the movie, and it'll be a thing. I'd be interested in seeing the TV version of this, just because it's weird
and considerably longer.
Yeah, but you don't need it. Obviously, it's got nothing to do with the story. Whereas the other ones, they don't change the story. They just add pounds to it.
Well, they did shoot new footage for Earthquake as well.
That would have been Universal too, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Definitely. Does anyone have any parting thoughts or parting shots before wrapping up this one?
No. Like I said, I kind of respected this one. Much more than I did when I first saw it. Maybe I'm getting old.
Well, I'm in the same boat. I think a lot of my fondness from the movie, is obviously partially nostalgic. I still think it's an engaging film, even with its faults. I like a lot of the ambiguity of it. It's a product of its time. I think it still holds up pretty well as a thriller, all things considered. I'm not sure if it's available on streaming or not.
It's on Amazon Prime. That's where I saw it.
You can rent
pay
it.
For it?
Yeah.
Oh, you can rent it. Okay.
Or you can buy it streaming, which is what I ended up doing, because I wanted to have it and I didn't want to wait for a Blu-ray to show up, not realizing that the Blu-ray would have the extended version of it. If I'd thought about it and knew that the film was going to win earlier, I'd have ordered it and gotten it in time.
Hey, I was as shocked as you were. I'm glad it did, though. I mean, it's
good.
I've never really talked about this movie with anybody. It's not, no one in my circle of friends has ever heard of it, and I can't get my daughters to watch it. So, anyway,
it's fallen through the cracks, and at the time it had some audience, but I don't remember it being like a big box office thing. And like I said, a lot of the critics just drubbed it.
Yeah, well, I think it recouped its money, but it wasn't a blockbuster.
Yeah. Well, we didn't drub it. Most of us seem to have found something positive in it, even if we didn't love it. What was it? It was aggressively fine.
Aggressively fine.
Yes.
I got to start using that in my reviews.
Yes,
I think that'll be
fine.
That'll be a term that comes up in the illustrated version of the podcast. I guarantee you. All right. Well,
you're welcome, everyone. I'm glad I could supply that to you.
Certainly. We didn't mention that the helicopter featured in the movie didn't explode.
I'm sorry.
Will, do you have an explanation for why it didn't explode?
Well, I mean, it's possible we could attribute this to John Cassavetes' presence in the film, because he famously said that he's never seen an exploding helicopter. He's never seen anyone go and blow somebody's head off. So why would he make films about them? So perhaps John Cassavetes had a hand in it.
Well, since his head does explode in a movie, that seems wrong.
Wrong movie.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap our discussion up of 2 Minute Warning, and we're going to take a quick break here to hear from a fellow Lamb Podcasting Network show, and we'll be back with our exit question and a game in just a minute.
Do you like learning hard facts about people's career and personal life?
Yeah.
Do you want to hear people's achievements and dirty, dirty disgraces?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to hear filthy movie summaries and a lot of foul language?
Oh, yes.
Want to guess who's dead based on a list of interesting facts?
Wait, what are you doing?
Oh, hey guys. I'm just making a commercial for our podcast, Rehearsing Around.
But it's a podcast where we speak of the recently deceased celebrities?
Yeah, and we play a game called Are You As Brain Dead As They Are? Where I do my best to leave Izzy, Chris, and Brenda unfulfilled.
Yeah, we do put the fun in funeral, don't we?
But why the hell does this sound like a phone sex ad?
Yeah, are we sure we really want to go this route?
Listen, guys, there are two things in this world that never waver in income, and that's sex and death. Sex sells, and we're talking about death. We're cornering the market with this ad.
Nothing good looks
sure.
You can find us at rabbitholepodcast.com or wherever you find your sexy podcast by looking for Rehearsing Around. That's HEARSING, and we'll see you around.
We're back, and our host for today, Dave Anderson, has come up with a game for us to play. I hope it's a relatively quick game. Let's see how it works. Dave, take it away.
All right, this is a Jeopardy type game, and in keeping with the theme of my website, instead of money, you're playing for kibbles. And there's 4 categories, and the questions are worth anywhere from 100 to 500 kibbles. Some questions are easy, some more difficult, and well, I'm with a bunch of movie buffs, so maybe they're all easy. Anyway, the player with the most kibbles after 4 rounds is the winner, and everyone else can come over here and clean my cat's litter box.
Yes.
If there's a tie, I have a couple of tiebreaker questions. Unlike real Jeopardy, speed on the button isn't required. Each player is just going to take turns selecting and answering, and the order is going to be based on the order that you're on my screen.
Fair enough.
You can do either 3 rounds or 4, so I'll leave it to you, Richard, on time.
Well, let's see how it's going.
There's 4 categories. Your categories are 2-minute warning actors, thrillers of the 1970s, sports-themed movies, and, because I'm still in mourning, a tribute to Gene Hackman.
Yes.
There are 100 kibble questions, 200, 300, 400, and 500. And first selection will be Will. What category and for how much?
Let's go 370s thrillers.
370s thrillers. Okay. In 1973's Day of the Jackal, who is the title character attempting to assassinate?
The President of France.
That is correct for 300 kibbles. All right. Next up will be Richard.
All right. Let's go for Gene Hackman for 500.
Gene Hackman for 500. Okay. What is Gene Hackman's highest grossing film he appeared in?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Superman.
That is also correct. Not taking inflation into account.
No.
Okay. Matthew, you're up.
All right. I'll go Pac-Man for 400.
Hackman for 400. In 1990, Gene Hackman starred in this remake of a classic film noir set on board a train.
My wife owns this movie. What is it called?
It's got an exploding helicopter in.
It does. Watched it not long ago, and I can't remember what it's called.
So you give up?
Your window
I can
is
give it up.
narrowing.
Yep, I'm going to give up.
You missed it by such a
Richard,
small margin.
Yeah, narrow margin. Fuck.
Okay. James.
2-minute warning actors for 500.
Okay. Prior to playing a quarterback in 2-minute warning, Joe Kapp was a real-life NFL quarterback. Name one team he played for.
Yeah, right. I was trying to avoid the sports theme question. I could rush over to IMDb, but I'm just going to say I'm going to let the time expire and hear that burp burp.
Okay, you could have said either the Minnesota Vikings or the Boston Patriots, as they were known back then.
French to me.
All right. Will, you're up again.
You know what? I'm going to stick with 70s thrillers, but give me 400 this time.
Okay. The climax of the 1977 film Black Sunday was partially filmed during the actual Super Bowl between which two NFL teams?
Oh, jeez. That's like an 800-point question. Right. I'm never going to get that. Pass.
Now I feel bad. Okay. The Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers. I promise there's no more questions like that.
Damn.
I think I promise there's no questions like that. All right, Richard.
What's the sports category? I'll go for that for 500.
Sports themed movies. Okay. This 1979 film is based on former NFL player Peter Gent's semi-autobiographical novel.
I'm trying to remember which one it is. Let's go with North Dallas 40.
That is correct.
All right.
Another $500 question. Or 500
Kibble.
question.
Kibble.
Thanks for the correction. Matthew.
You know what? Let's do sports movies for 4.
Okay, sports movies for 4. A legendary stunt biker, Evel Knievel, played himself in this legendary flop, which also starred Gene Kelly.
I have no idea.
James.
I'm not going to do very well with this trivia game, I don't think.
Anyone else know?
James. Viva Knievel.
That is correct. Viva Knievel. That's a legendarily bad one.
Yes.
James.
Yes.
See, you did get a sports question.
Yeah. Well, can we call it a sports question, really?
It's sports-esque.
Sports themes for, well, we haven't done 70s thrillers for 500, have we?
Nope.
Let's do it.
Okay. In 1974 is the Parallax View. The Parallax Corporation is in the business of recruiting assassins. In what city does the first assassination take place?
Seattle.
I knew you were going to get that one.
Where are you from there?
Yes, I'm only 40 miles away.
Nice.
Falls off the Space Needle.
That's another movie I love.
Yeah, it's a great movie. And they
Okay.
didn't shoot the Space Needle in Canada either. It's amazing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, Will, you're up.
Give me Hackman 400.
Hackman 400. No, Hackman 400 has been taken.
Oh. What's left on the Hackman front?
100, 200, and 300.
Give me 300.
What's Gene Hackman's last film?
For some reason, Welcome to Mooseport is coming into
That's
my head.
it.
That's right.
Paying attention, thank goodness.
Okay, Richard.
Oh, let's go with the 2-minute warning actors for 400.
Okay. Jack Klugman and Martin Balsam previously appeared together in what classic film?
12 Angry Men.
Correct. You're on a tear, Richard. Okay,
Once in a while that
Matthew, you're
happens.
Hackman for, I think 200 is left.
200 and 100.
201. During his career, Gene Hackman won Oscars for these two films.
That would be The French Connection and Unforgiven.
That is correct for 200. You're on the board. James.
Okay, let's make some kibble here. 2-minute warning actors for 300.
Okay. What classic science fiction film features Walter Pidgeon as a submarine commander?
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Oh, I missed it.
Incorrect. The answer is Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Oh, that's right.
I was going to stick a Forbidden Planet question there, but I thought that's too obvious.
It wasn't too obvious for me.
I know, Richard, we can do a fourth round if you want, or we can stop here.
I think we can do one more round.
Okay. Will, you're up.
What's left in sports?
1, 2, and 3.
Give me 3.
Steve McQueen played a race driver in this 1971 film.
Le Mans.
Correct. That's another childhood favorite. Okay, Richard.
Give me the sports for 200.
What fictional minor league hockey team is featured in 1977's Slapshot?
The Chiefs.
Correct. Charlestown Chiefs.
My favorite sports movie.
That one's neck and neck with The Longest Yard for me. Matthew? You're next.
Hackman for 1.
Gene Hackman's character's name in The French Connection.
Oh, it's Popeye Doyle.
That is correct. And that's all the Hackman questions. And James.
Yes. Let's see. 70s thrillers for 200.
What does Robert Redford do for a living in 3 Days of the Condor?
He's a book reader for the CIA.
That is correct. Okay, that's 4 rounds.
Very good.
And let's see. The winner by a sizable margin is Richard with 1,600 kibbles.
Ah, that means I get to feed the kitty, which is not a term that you want to know.
The rest of you get to clean Mr. Bonnie's cat box.
That's it.
Oh, well, that's what I do anyway.
Them's the breaks.
Well, thank you for putting the game together. I had fun. Always when you win, it's always fun. And sure. I liked all of the questions.
Yeah.
Good.
I kept thinking of the George Hamilton Evel Knievel movie rather than the Evel Knievel version of the Evel Knievel movie. What was the name of the Hamilton film?
I think it was just called Evel Knievel.
Just the name. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the end, and we're looking for an exit before we do our opportunity to share what we have to share. So Dave came up with a couple of exit questions. We'll keep our answers relatively simple, I hope, so that we don't go too long. Dave, do you want to tell us what your questions were and pick the order in which we get to answer them?
Okay. I had 2 questions. People often mention classic films that if they were made or presented as is, couldn't be made today. Yeah. So is there a particular film that you feel falls into that category? The other question was, what do you feel was Charlton Heston's best film of the 70s? So for the first question, we'll start with Will.
Well, the film that I've gone for here is a film from the 1980s. It's 1986's Soul Man, which famously features C. Thomas Howell pretending to be black in order to get into the kind of university that he wants to. Yeah, for obvious reasons, one would hope that this film wouldn't be remade today. I mean, I think it's fair to say it was a well-intentioned film, even if it was wildly misjudged and has subsequently, aged terribly.
It's a good choice. And what's Chuck Heston's best film from the 70s?
Oh, yes. So I'm a big fan of disaster movies, and many to pick from in the 70s for Charlton Heston, but I'm going to go for Airport 75. It is my favourite of that particular franchise. A great teeth-grinding performance from Charlton Heston in that film, and he spends the entirety of that film in a bright yellow turtleneck, which, extraordinary wardrobe choice. So, yeah,
Great
Airport 75.
Okay. Richard.
Oh, well, that's the first one. The obvious answer is Blazing Saddles. Everybody knows that you couldn't make Blazing Saddles today because people have senses of humor that are more sensitive than they were. We can't acknowledge the fact that the humor was deliberately designed to undermine the racist elements in society in Blazing Saddles. People don't appreciate that that's what's being mocked, so I think that's a good answer, although I think the one I would choose is Dirty Harry, because I just think it's too sympathetic to the views of the cop Harry Callahan, and we have a different view of the police and their role in society today, so I don't think you could get away with rooting for the cop who is on the outside the way he is. And there are so many elements in this that are you'd be touching on a lot of electrified fences here and there.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you put them, yeah, thank you. You'd get that. Heston's best film of the 70s is Soylent Green, a film that I think is really well made for a limited budget. It's a great science fiction premise. It has a terrific performance from Edward G. Robinson, and Heston is pretty good in it as well. And it does a lot of the same kinds of things with editing. It puts things together pretty well to make the movie look bigger than it really is, and to integrate contemporary things into futuristic things. And my favorite sequence is, of course, Saul going home.
Of course. I don't know if you've ever seen this. Blazing Saddles is actually remade in a way as an animated movie called Paws of Fury that I reviewed a few years ago. And instead of human characters, it's a dog who becomes the sheriff in this town full of cats. And Mel Brooks provides one of the voices in that one.
Cool. I'm going to have to look for that.
It's not bad, especially if you've seen the original Blazing Saddles.
What's it titled? Paws of Fury?
Paws of Fury, yeah. And fans of Blazing Saddles will love all the references to that first film. And it is the same plot and some of the same dialogue. Not all of it, of course, but...
The sheriff is a bitch.
All right, Matthew. Same two questions.
Well, my choices have already been said, Blazing Saddles and Soul Man, so I guess I'm going to go with the classic answer, which is The Birth of a Nation.
Of course.
A film from 1915 which portrays the Ku Klux Klan as a heroic outfit. That's you definitely couldn't do that today.
Yeah.
Well, you say that, but
yeah.
And it's
worryingly,
well, you probably couldn't have done it last year anyway. Who knows moving forward. In terms of Charlton Heston's best 1970s movie, I agree with Richard. It's definitely Soylent Green, which is not only a great film but a formative science fiction film for me. And I also just like exclaiming sometimes that something is made of people just to mess with people. And if you want a second, yeah. And if you want a second answer, I actually think he's really fun in the Richard Lester 3 and 4 Musketeer movies.
Oh, yeah. Those are good. Okay, James.
Movie that all of my answers have been taken. The Blazing Saddles was my blazing answer to what couldn't be made today. I don't think Dr. Strangelove was on the other day, and I don't think he could make that movie today. Even though we enjoy watching it, but then we also enjoy watching Blazing Saddles. You just couldn't get it. As far as my favorite Charlton Heston movies from the 70s, my favorite is The Three and Four Musketeers by Richard Lester. I thought that was his best performance, even though it's basically a cameo. But my favorite of the 70s is The Omega Man, which is an adaptation of I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. They took some liberties with it, kind of made it groovy, but I really liked that movie when it first came out.
Okay. Well, for me, I tried to stay away from some obvious choices, and my choice, you could basically say about any war film made before 1960, almost any war film made before 1960. But I chose to single out a movie called Battle Cry from 1955. It's definitely one of those that can only be appreciated if you view it in the context of when it was made. In this movie, war is a great thing, and all young men crave battle. All women are dames, the enemies are Japs, and soldiers' dads approve of their sons' decisions to start smoking. It's a gung-ho movie that wears its nationalism on its sleeve proudly, okay? And these guys are just itching to go out there and kill people and get killed. Everyone's a walking stereotype. There's the feisty Latino, the stoic Indian, the comic relief from the Bronx, the backwoods country boy. This and so many other war movies, as is, you just couldn't make today and have people see it with a straight face. For the Charlton Heston film, I went with my personal favorite. I realize it's probably not the best of the films he did, but it's my favorite, and that's Earthquake. Largely because, I saw it at the height of the disaster movie craze, and I was bitten by the bug, and I got to see it in Sense Around. And I loved every destructive minute of it.
When I saw Earthquake in Sense Around, they had a promotional film with Charlton Heston in it for physical fitness. And there was a shot of him at a tennis court. And for some reason, they had turned on the Sense Around system, and when he hit the ball, the entire theater shook. Which is what you would expect from Charlton Heston.
That's priceless.
I expect it was an ace, and it, thundered against the back wall of the theater.
Absolutely.
Well, I think you guys are all aces, and I want to give you a chance to talk about whatever it is that you've got coming up and available for everybody else to peruse. So let's start with Will. Will, what's going on Exploding Helicopter? What can we look forward to?
You can look forward to the next episode of Exploding Helicopter, which will be coming out once this film broadcasts. Don't want to say too much about it. Just tune in and listen to it. You can find us on any podcast you listen to at Exploding Helicopter. If you want to find out some more information about the history of how helicopters explode in films, and you can check out our website at explodinghelicopter.com. And we're on social media. We're on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook. We're on Letterboxd. Just search for Exploding Helicopter, and you'll be able to find us.
Good deal. We'll be looking for you everywhere. Matthew, how about you? You got something that you want to focus on this week?
I write freelance. You can find me in most of the biggest publications I write for would be Exclaim and That Shelf. I've had several reviews up in the last little while. The easiest way to find all of that work is to hit up my personal portfolio page, which is stretched.ca. You can also find me on the social medias. I am at SmatthewAF in most places, but most actively on Blue Sky and Threads. And last but not least, you should also check out CassadiaCritics.com, which is the homepage of a critics association that I helped co-found last year in the Pacific Northwest of North America. We're up to 25 members now, and things are going swimmingly. So you should check it out. We publish a recap of everyone's work every month at least, so there's lots of great writing to check out.
Dave, have you got something that you would like to draw attention to?
Well, I'm trying to keep up with all the Blu-ray and 4K reviews I've got coming, including some from Severin Films and a few cult classics like Venom and Delicatessen, and Brandon Cronenberg's first movie, Antiviral. And I've also begun a on-again, off-again series of essays charting my quest to see every disaster movie ever made. And I'm starting off with some of the early ones of the silent era.
James, I know that you've got things that you would like to share with us, so it's your turn.
Blogging by Cinemalight is its usual chaotic self. This week we'll be having reviews. We did Mickey 17 last week. We'll be doing a Black Bag and The Day the World Ended, a Looney Tunes movie later on in the week. And hopefully we'll also have Now I've Seen Everything department, Sidney Pollack division, because I finally saw the last movie that I haven't seen of his, which was really difficult to find, and that was Havana with Robert Redford. It just disappeared off the face of the earth. And Richard, your Don't Make a Scene from The Quick and the Dead is featured today.
Oh, nice. Love that movie, and we have another Hackman film there that is worth talking about and spending some time on.
The slow motion entrance of Gene Hackman.
Oh, it's awesome. Yes. There are a lot of great scenes in that film that you could do under your series. I like that. I like Lance Henriksen showing up in the long shadow, the long
Yes.
shadow. That's a pretty good one too. On my site, just the usual. I'll update whatever I happen to be seeing in theaters. I posted recently on Mickey 17. I finally caught up with writing that review a week late. I wasn't too excited about the film, so that's why it took me so long to respond to it. I'll have something up on a film that I enjoyed quite well and does a better job of integrating violence and humor together than the previous 3 or 4 films that I saw that tried to do that. Novocaine, which I think is a lot of fun, so I would recommend that one. And of course, those of you who haven't already checked in for the illustrated version of the podcast, the Lambcast is also appearing on YouTube for you, and it's filled with lots of images and lots of fun, and you'll get occasional snarky commentary from me on top of whatever else we happen to be talking about. But those of you who don't listen, or those of you who don't watch, who are on this show, you won't know how I'm mocking you when that happens if you don't pay attention.
Excellent.
I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this week. I know that the tickets were expensive. I hope a priest sat next to you and you had good luck while you were watching the show. Get a hot dog and a beer, and believe me, you cannot get out of the Coliseum, out of those 33 exits, as fast as all those people are trying to do in the movie. The field is your best choice. Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.
Ha 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 ha!